Hello everybody, welcome to Actual Spinster. My name is Anna Marie, and yeah, I'm just going to talk to you about what I read in January. So I ended up sort of treating January a bit like a spillover month because I was in the middle of reading a few things in December that were published in the 2000s into the 2020s, but I wanted to finish them. So yeah, that sort of was my approach to the month. And I do think basically my pre-2000s reading project is basically just I'm going to try to read over 50% published before 2000, because that seems to be the most manageable way to do it, considering how contrary I am, and also that I want to read my physical books and yada yada yada. I also just want to have fun with my reading, so yeah. Okay, so that being said, a book that I finished in January that I started in December was a reread of Gideon the Ninth by Tamsin Muir. I basically reread this because having read Harrow and then Nona, and so, you know, going further with the series, I kind of wanted to reread Gideon, which is the first in the series, to see if it like held up, having read further and like uncovered more mysteries. And like I did kind of expect it to not hold up, but it didn't. Like it was at the same or similar level as when I first read it. So I was like, okay, interesting. I think I'm just kind of like very intrigued in the series, but I also kind of struggle to understand why or if it's any good. And then like, but I think it is good. But I also do think that there is just such like a heavy, like I really wish that there would like not so many fucking meme references in it. I think that's really the major thing that like makes me enjoy it way less, is like all of these references that like I do think they lessen throughout the series, but like the first book is riddled with them. Sometimes I feel like I'm reading it in like quite a resistant manner because like I just don't, you know, I yeah. And then some bits really are very silly, but then it's also sort of like, well, that's part of, I think, a kind of like pulpy genre of like queer sci-fi space opera type stuff. So it does make sense. It's not sort of like, and I guess I also do feel like sometimes people talk about like, oh, I really don't like the writing style of this book, which is fair enough to think, but I also sometimes feel like that completely undermines or like completely ignores the fact that like you might put on a particular writing style to make a particular point and to get a particular like response from people. I don't necessarily know that it's happening in Gideon the Ninth, but I just feel like, you know, sometimes people can malign a particular author's work in a way that suggests that they think that the author is writing, like their narrative voice is like a deep expression of their self, which obviously to some degree it is, but at the same time, like when you make work and art, you sometimes choose to put on a voice or not, and like again, you do that for a reason, or you know, hopefully you're reading books where people are intentional about how and why they tell a story. Obviously not all of them are like this. Anyway, this completely got away from me. This isn't really about Gideon the Ninth, but anyway, I did like it. Some of it made more sense than it did the first time, and so that was also, I guess, nice. But yeah, I mean, I still thought it was a solid book. I thought this combo looked nice, and now I'm like, does it look really weird? I just don't want you to see my elbows. So the next thing I read, I think I did talk about in my New York book haul, and that's A Bintel Brief by Love and Longing in Old New York by Leanna Fink. And yeah, I really loved this. I thought it was really wonderful. So it's a fairly short graphic novel, and it just tends to use two colours, so white and blue or black and blue. And there's like two kind of timelines in a way, I guess. It kind of starts with like somebody finding like a notebook with clippings from a newspaper, from their like granddad, I think, or whatever. And then the like clippings, you know, like a person kind of comes out of them and starts talking about life and stuff and what the clippings were. And basically the clippings were these like, there's a Yiddish newspaper in the 1890s, and it's still going, I think, but only online. And I don't know that it has a particularly robust Yiddish section. I think sometimes it still publishes in Yiddish though, called Forwards or Forward. And this takes a particular section of that newspaper, which was called A Bintel Brief, which means like letters basically, right? I think bintul is letters, where they would publish basically people asking for advice, and then the editor of the newspaper would write advice back to those asking for it. And so like it's basically, so it goes into particular like dilemmas and instances from that section of the paper. I have to say, one thing that I think I really just enjoyed even more deeply than I would have if I just read this anyway, was that like, as somebody who works in periodical studies, I thought it was really wonderful to kind of see like a graphic novel exploration of like the relationship between finding people in a periodical archive like this. I really just loved, like the sort of permeability between like time and the way that something so small might come to represent like a really amazing sort of insight into people's lives in the past. And I do think that it's just very vivid in how it brings to life like the experience of a lot of Jewish immigrants to New York in the 1890s. And some of them are really funny and some of them are really, really sad, but it's very sweet and I would definitely recommend this. There's a recipe for a type of soup called shav, which I think I will try to make. It has like egg in it, which is very interesting to me. So the next thing I read was actually again something I was reading in December, but this is fine for my pre-2000s reading, and that's the Journal of Catherine Mansfield, which I finally finished. I have to say, I think that it's weird that it was published. Is that true? I don't know if that's entirely fair. I do feel like, I think it's like very interesting to sort of see her, to some degree see her process in terms of her writing. There's moments where she'll write a scene from her life and then she'll rewrite that scene but much more stripped down normally, and obviously that's quite an interesting process in terms of her being like a short story writer, especially a short story writer who would write stories from a place of her childhood, I guess, like, looking back, and out of a sense of grief, I guess, too, and then also nostalgia. Not all of her stories are from her childhood, but I think some of her most famous ones, like I'm thinking of like At the Bay and all the ones with Kezia in, right, because that was sort of like her self-insert. Silly way to say it, but it's very sad. I also fundamentally think that Persephone Books should have published, if they were going to do this, they should have published the journals re-edited by them. What this is a republication of the original 1927 print that was edited by her husband, I think they did get married, called John Middleton Murray. I guess I just feel kind of hostile to like letting people who are in romantic relationships with these like famous modernist women be the ones that facilitate your kind of like relationship with them in terms of their private life, their private personal interior life, because I just don't really trust that. I don't really trust men to do that in a way that like genuinely allows the woman to speak in her like multitudinous and like sort of free self as much as you can get to that. I realise it's like difficult and whatever, but like I don't know. I did also find it quite tedious in points. And part of me is a bit like, why was this published? There are some bits definitely that are interesting, and she does talk about literature and she talks about Chekhov quite a lot. I don't feel like I got very much out of this, although I think if you are interested in Catherine Mansfield, then it's worthwhile. But like I said, I really think that like this edition, I think that there probably is, right, like a better modern edition. I would really hope so. Because and I also think that like there is like a level to which stuff isn't explained. Like John Middleton Murray, like he does explain some things, like he puts a couple notes in. He doesn't do that for very many things, and I think that if it was somebody who was not at all related to Catherine Mansfield or the people that she's writing about, we could get actually more insight into what was being described and what was being referenced, and especially in terms of anyway. So like, it was interesting, but it was also a little bit tedious and not that interesting at points. And to be honest, I also just am a bit like, I think there should be a hesitancy to read people's journals. And I guess there is this idea that she sort of did leave them to be published, but I sort of wonder how much that's totally true as like a consistent desire as opposed to like a whim. And then, yeah, I don't know. I don't know that much about Catherine Mansfield, so maybe if I knew more I would also feel differently about this, but yeah. Also, she had died so recently, since this was then published. She died in like 1923, and then this was published 4 years later. I feel like that's very, very soon. I don't know. Anyway, yeah. I do think there are parts that are really written beautifully, and you're like, wow, Catherine, you really are a very good writer. Next, I read a really short book, online actually, and I'll try to leave a link to where you can read it, because it's on Internet Archive. So yeah, Benjamin Zephaniah, he passed away in December, was it? Who was this like wonderful Black British poet. He spoke about, yeah, his politics. He refused an order of the British Empire or whatever, which like more like people should do. It's fucking wild to me that people accept that. Including Terry Pratchett, who I do love, but like, why did he do that? Yeah, so Benjamin Zephaniah, he passed away, and I saw a post where they were talking about some of his work, like his various different work. I mean, I read his work as a child, and I might have read the odd poem or two since then, and I did really like his work. But anyway, so I wanted to pick this up partially because of that, and also because it felt very relevant too, because this is called Rasta Time in Palestine, and it was written in the 80s, I want to say. No, I think it was based on a trip that happened in the late 80s, and it was like published in the 1990s. It's like 35 pages, you know, it's a little kind of pamphlet zine thing, and it's just like about his time visiting Palestine, and it's very interesting too in the sense of thinking about South Africa and Israel right now. It's obviously written like sort of during the process of South Africa dismantling apartheid. I think, you know, the process went on for a while, but I think negotiations started in 1990, and it was very interesting to sort of read it in the context of the ICJ trial where South Africa is taking Israel to court, and this was obviously before the court ruled that genocide was plausibly being committed by Israel, and they obviously still haven't called for a ceasefire, which is sort of crazy. So with that kind of madness going on, I thought it was just interesting to read this little snippet. There was also quite a lot about like Rastafarianism, which is not something I really knew very much about, and I mean, it was, you know, it was fine. I'm glad I read it, and I didn't know it existed, and it was nice to read something, I guess, to just kind of like hear Benjamin Zephaniah's voice as well. So next I feel like we're kind of going around to many different places with this, but next I read a Terry Pratchett book, that's Carpe Jugulum. This is part of the Witches series, and it includes vampires, and like, I loved this. This is one of my new favourites of Discworld for sure, and I'm sure it will be on my favourites of 2024, because like, I enjoyed this so much. It was just so fun and wonderful. I sort of don't want to tell you anything about the plot because I just enjoyed it so much. Actually, I will say this, that I do think that these vampires are like the closest to what we do in the Shadows vampires, like the kind of comedic energy and the sort of like playfulness around vampirism itself. I think is definitely like in this, in a way that like mirrors those vampires. So if you're looking for that kind of like vampiric comedy, then I would definitely suggest checking this out. It's just really wonderful, and like, I love Agnes a lot. I think she's a really nice character to read about and from, I guess, even if it's kind of sad how she's treated, but I don't know, I just really like her, I guess, partially maybe because she's fat, but like, you know, I don't know, I feel like Terry Pratchett is really nice. I mean, he's funny about it, and he's like, I don't think he's like super respectful or whatever, but I also sort of, I mean, he treats I do feel like there's a sense that he treats people with like different body types in a same way, like it's all kind of food for comedy. And obviously like some of these like fat women like Nanny Ogg are like really important and really powerful women and characters, and yeah, and I never feel like it's just like their fatness that's supposed to be funny, like it's the whole character. Like Nanny Ogg's like an icon. And so is Agnes, so yeah. Yeah, I'd really recommend this one. I am really looking forward to rereading it in the future. It was just wonderful. So I was on like a bit of a Terry Pratchett enthusiasm. Also I guess it was January, and I think I'm still going to be reading some Terry Pratchett in February, or I know I will because I'm currently reading one, but yeah. So I finally reread Wintersmith, which is the third in the Tiffany Aching series. I don't think I reread A Hatful of Sky last year. I think I reread it the year before, and this was the next on my reread, which I'm just like constantly cycling through because I love them and they give me a lot of comfort. And yeah, I definitely, you know, I think if you're looking for some like comforting children's fiction, and really enjoyed Wintersmith. I think when I first read it, it was probably one of my less favourite ones, but honestly they're all just really fantastic, and the more I read them, aside from The Shepherd's Crown, the more that I read them, you know, the more I just kind of deeply love and enjoy them. Oh, I will say that like I do think that for my reading project of yeah, I'm just like adding more and more to it, but whatever, like it's my thing. But I do think that I'm not going to count rereads in that, so yeah. Then we have another book that I was reading in December and wanted to finish in January to get through. That's The Golem and the Genie by Helen Wacker, and this is a book set in New York City. So I started it in New York City whilst I was there, which I did really enjoy, and there's definitely some stuff about like Lower East Side, and like, which was, it wasn't exactly where I was staying, but was like nearby, and they talk a lot about the Bowery, and like I walked along that street quite a few times. So I really enjoyed doing that, and I ultimately really enjoyed this. I did feel like maybe it kind of just kept going, and I did sort of wish it would end, but not like, it's not that I felt like it was too long. I think I just sort of like lost some of my enthusiasm for it. But yeah, I think it's a really beautiful book, and I really enjoyed it. I didn't give it 5 stars, which I thought at the beginning I might, but that's fine. I you know, I gave it 4 stars or whatever, and like it was great. It is about a golem and a genie, and it takes a long time for them to meet, but obviously you know they are because like this book is about them. So yeah, basically it starts in Germany, Prussia, where a man asks this mystical Kabbalah practicing, you know, learned but slightly sort of chaotic and evil man called Yehuda Shalman to make him a golem so that he can have her as a wife, and because he's gonna go to America, and he's like quite rich too, so that's also why he can afford it. So this golem is made for him, and then on the passage, this happens like in the first chapter or whatever, on the passage to New York, he has a really painful feeling in his side, and so he like goes and he checks on the golem and like wakes her up, so she's awake, but then he dies from like a burst appendix and like stuff like that, I think. But she's awake. She doesn't stop being awake. It just means she no longer has like a master. So and she's in New York, so then it's kind of, it follows her, and then a sort of similar and parallel story, I guess, more like parallel story, is happening to the genie, who you know, somebody takes some like old pot or whatever to be mended to a like a metal worker, and as that person is like cleaning the oil holder, lamp, whatever, I don't think it's quite a lamp, but you know, yeah, he's called Arbili, he's nice. As he's cleaning it, a genie comes out, but like as a human, like who's been trapped in his human form, but you know, he still has like some of his genie powers. Yeah, and then we go off from that, and so the genie is in Little Syria, which is not something I knew very much about, like in terms of like Arab American immigration to New York City, and so that was also really nice. I definitely have some questions about some of the sort of representations in terms of like racial and gendered politics. I don't think any of them are like really, really awful. But I do think, yeah, you know, I have some qualms about it, I guess. I do think that, you know, so Hava is this, like, the golem, new to the world, you know, she's just been created, and then the genie is very, very old, like thousands of years old, and so I sort of wish that it was the other way around to some degree, or like, I don't know, yeah. But I also think this is very sweet, and it's just nice. It's nice. I enjoyed it, I really did. And I think if you're looking for good historical fantasy, then I definitely recommend it. And if you're looking for like nice Jewish stories, I'd also recommend it. There's also a rabbi in here who I loved. Whilst I was reading this, I also had to give a presentation in my conversion class about death and burial practices in Judaism, and there's quite a lot of reference to death and burial practices in this, so I was like, which was nice. I don't know if I have anything actually interesting to say aside from what I've already said. I just don't really want to go that into the plot, because, like, yeah, I guess one of the reasons why I didn't give it like 5 stars is because it did make me uncomfortable, but I don't think it's not on purpose, if that makes sense, like, because there's lots of questions about consent and kind of like obedience in terms of Hava the golem, because she was created to do her master's bidding. She's like sort of tied to a man, or potentially to a man, and she can very sort of intensely feel people's desires and wishes, and like and yeah, I don't know, there's some stuff around that just I didn't especially like reading. I don't think any of it is like super violent in terms of her though. Well, is that true? I mean, it's kind of upsetting. And then I did also feel like the genie, like, he was put in quite a lot of like upsetting positions that I did find, like I said, upsetting. I wouldn't say, again, though, I don't think this is especially like intense and like really, really sad and upsetting. Like, I think it maintains kind of quite a solid level of okayness, even if there's also sad and bad things that happen in it. The Terry Pratchett book I'm currently reading is Men at Arms, which is the second in the Guard to Guard series, and I got like 100 pages in January, but yeah, I'll finish it this month. I was more focused on finishing the many things I was reading so that I can start 2024 with a bit more, with a bit less reading stuff on my plate. Yeah, I'm never as successful as I want to be at that, but there we go. So yeah, let me know if you've read anything that I mentioned, or what you thought, and or about how your January was, and I will talk to you when I next talk to you. Bye.